Hello and welcome to part 2 of this HTML and CSS tutorial looking at structuring content in web pages with divs. So previously we created a web page that looked a little bit like this, that had one div with an ID of header. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to add what we call a container div that will contain everything on our web page and just push everything in from the sides just a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is put these two paragraphs into their own divs, one that will sit on the left hand side and one that will sit on the right hand side. So let's go ahead and do that now. So the first thing that I want to do, I guess, is with my HTML, I want to have a div that everything inside my page sits in except for the body itself. So generally we call that a container, because it contains everything, and it's going to start just after the body and it's going to finish just before the body closes. So let's put that in now. So we're going to say div, with our brackets, div id equals container, so it starts there and it finishes at the very bottom. So I'm going to say here /div, and because the opening and closing tags are so far apart, it might be helpful for me to add a comment to the closing end of this div, just to tell me which div it closes, because we can't tell just by looking at this that it actually closes the container. So we can put a comment into our code, and what a comment is it shows up in code view like this, but it won't actually show on the website. We won't see it on our website. It's just like a little note to ourselves as the designer. So you write a comment by going angle bracket, exclamation mark, dash, dash, and then you can write your comment, and I'm going to say end of container to tell me it's the end of the container div. And to finish our comment off, and this is very important that you finish your comments, you go dash, dash, closing angle bracket. Now you'll see that the comment is green. If I didn't put this closing bit of the comment in, everything after it is also green. And that's bad, because if we comment these things out, like if these are green, if they're comments, they won't show on the page, so they won't. It will mean that our page won't work properly. So it's very important that we close off our comments here. Now, of course, here's our container. Everything in between the opening container div and the closing container div is inside of it. So that means I can select everything. Actually, it might be easier for me to just go to the top. Click before the header div and scroll down, and then shift click just before the end of the closing container div. So shift and click and press tab once, and that will push those things all inside. So now we can see that we've got our container that opens here, and our header div is inside of our container. See, it sits inside it. So I'm going to save that, and we'll refresh the page, and you'll see that at the moment nothing's changed. So I refresh. It's been very slow today. It still looks like just the web page. It's not until I edit the CSS and change the way that the container looks that things will start to show up as looking a little bit different. So just like we wrote hash header to control our header div, we're going to write hash container to control the CSS for our container div. And the first bit of CSS I'm going to write is to tell it how wide I want this to be. And generally with a web page, if you have a container, it's usually somewhere between 800 and 1200 pixels wide. Because my video recorder is quite small, I'm going to make it 800 pixels wide. And just so that you can see it, I'm going to give it a particular color. So I'm going to say background color, and what background color should I choose? Let's make it easy to see. I'm going to make it yellow. Alright, so now everything on our page should be inside of a container that's 800 pixels wide, and that is yellow. Let's save it and refresh our page to see if that works. Great, and so you can see now that we've got a container here, and our container actually includes the header. And if I was to be able to move this header away, you'd see that behind the header it would be yellow. But at the moment it's not yellow. It's just it's red because the red container is sitting on top, or inside of actually the red header is sitting inside of the yellow container. Just so we can see that, let's give our container some margins. I'm going to say 10 pixel margin. Sorry, not margin, padding. Padding 10 pixels. Then if I look at my website, it should push everything away 10 pixels from the edge. There we go. So now you can see that the red header is inside the yellow container, because you can see this padding around the outside. Now here's where we need to be a little bit careful. We've set our container width as 800 pixels, but we've also said there's 10 pixels worth of padding. So in our website, that means that it's 10 pixels to here, plus 800 pixels across, plus 10 more pixels there. So actually, technically, this yellow box now, this yellow div, is 820 pixels. 800 plus 10 that side, plus 10 that side. Cool. So it's looking good, but it's stuck on the left-hand side of the page. So to make it sit in the middle of the page, I'm going to tell it to make its left margin equal to auto and its right margin equal to auto. And the margin is how far away from the outside of other things that it sits. So if I give this padding, it pushes things inside it. And if I give it a margin, it pushes things away outside it. So I'm going to say margin dash right, auto, AUTO for automatic, and margin dash left, auto for automatic. And I'll just show you what that looks like now. So that makes the left and right sides the same distance. So now our container sits in the middle of the page. So this is actually starting to look really nice. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put these first two, actually I'm going to put this first paragraph here into a div, and I'm going to put the second two into another div. And the first one is going to be on the left, and the other two are going to be on the right. And I'm going to make the first one a little bit narrower. So it's 800 pixels across, so maybe I'll make this 300, and maybe I'll make that one 500. So, like I said, the first paragraph, I'm going to have a div that goes around it. So that first paragraph starts there and ends here. So I'll go just before the paragraph, I'll create a new line and go div ID equals left, and I'll close that div off after it, and I'll add a comment, end of left, and I'll tab in the paragraph to show that it sits inside. So click and then shift click at the end, tab, and oh, that didn't quite work as I thought it might. There we go. There's only one line, so I just needed to press it once. Cool. So we've got our left div there, and then here we'll have our right div. Div ID equals right, and this starts before the second paragraph, and it finishes after the last paragraph. So it finishes here. And I'll add a comment again, end of right. Now if I save and refresh, you'll see nothing's changed, just because those divs are there, but there's no style associated with them. So now in my CSS, I can create a definition for left. So I'm going to say hash left to select my left container, so my left div. And inside it, I'm going to say width 300 pixels, and then I'm going to say background color. I'm going to make this one light blue. So it's going to be light blue and it's going to be 300 pixels wide. Let's just save that and see what it looks like. Cool, so we've got this div here that is light blue and it's 300 pixels wide. What I'm also going to do is I think I want to, maybe I'm going to make it a, no, so we'll leave this as 300, but where I want to make the total width of it 300. So I'm going to add some padding, which means I'm going to have to take away from the width. So if I say padding 10 pixels, it's going to put 10 pixels padding on the left and 10 pixels padding on the right, which is 20 pixels, which means I need to reduce the width of this one by 20 pixels. So it'll be 280 pixels. There's lots of maths involved in doing divs, measuring the width of divs. And I'm going to say float left, which means push myself as far up to the left as I can, even if there's things above me that I can fit next to. I'm going to sit to the left of them. And I'm going to just do the same for my right div. I'm going to give it a width. This time I'm going to say 500 pixels, because 500 plus 300, remember 280 plus 10 plus 10 is 300. 500 plus 300 equals 800, which is the whole width of my container. Width is 500. Background color, I'm going to make this one pink. I'm going to also say float left. And I'm also going to give it 10 pixels of padding, which means I'm going to have to reduce the width of the entire div by just a little bit. So 10 pixels on the left, 10 pixels on the right, which means I need to take 20 pixels away from 500. 500 minus 20 is 480. So if I save this now, let's have a look at what my page looks like. Great, so it's a little bit tricky to see because of the colors, but we've got a blue div on the left here, a pink div on the right, and yeah, it pretty much looks like I expected. It maybe should have a little bit of yellow around here, but I might deal with that in one final video where I put a footer on this page. So stay tuned for tutorial number 3.